is okay. Oh, awesome. And I apologize, as Katie was finishing up, I got a mandatory restart on my computer, and it's going to restart no matter whether or not I like it in 18 minutes.
Okay.
Working under pressure here.
We'll deal with that, but you are the last talk before the break, so feel free to go over a little bit.
Awesome. Well, I won't be able to. I got 18 minutes, like I said.
Okay.
It's going to restart on me whether I like it or not, and I'll lose you. So, yeah, this is kind of just to follow up a little more on what Katie was talking about in emergency management and getting in and finding your way in. I've been now in emergency management in some form or another, going on 20 some years. Worked in the Weather Service, worked at the state emergency management, now in FEMA, and I've always had interest from meteorologists about the field and emergency management opportunities, and I think there's a lot to be said about the opportunities and other ways to get that experience, as was Trish and Laura talking about, coming in with some other experience that can really give you a leg up. And I think emergency management is a great place. There might not be as much formality in it, and you might find a better way to get some of that experience, because it seems like there's always, unfortunately, disasters happening in emergency management. Back in the day, I had a former boss that joked they liked hiring meteorologists, and he hired a lot of them right out of school to work in the state. He thought that the critical thinking skills that they came out with were important to have in emergency management, and the emergency management itself was easy to teach, but to have those critical thinking skills to make use of problem solving is learned through the meteorology program, believe it or not. And I would agree. I felt like I got experience in being a team player. A lot of times doing things in teams came about in meteorology for me to make it through some of my classes. Using, being able to draw out or take something that's abstract and make it more concrete to solve problems, we're adept at doing. And sometimes using technology to solve problems and how we can get at problem solving can be important. Another thing that meteorologists have going for them is they're familiar with disasters. They understand some of the vernacular and history, and having that as a way to kind of connect with emergency managers. So you can see there's some connection there. The other thing is there's parallel skill sets. In emergency management, that's one big group, but as Katie would attest to, when they open up their EOC, they have people from all over the health side, the health sector, transportation, communications, GIS. I saw some questions about GIS, social media, being able to do some analysis and planning. A lot of those skill sets that the meteorologists may have interest in parallel what emergency management needs. And we're also used to working in what I would like to call disaster mode, knowing and ramping up and getting ready for severe weather or inclement weather, and monitoring and having that situational awareness. Those are key things in emergency management that they do and look for. So there's some really unique things that meteorologists bring to the table because of that. Some of the folks that I know, I was rolling through my brain and memory banks of all those meteorologists I know that made their ways into emergency management. They started off as maybe a planner like myself, a hazard planner, a social media person. There's state meteorologists out there more and more. The states are putting a lot of efforts towards having meteorologists being there day in, day out. Mitigation, Katie mentioned touching mitigation, but the planners and understanding the hazards role. Watch officers, I've known watch officers that start off as meteorologists that have found their way in doing more meteorology and emergency management. And GIS, definitely a skill set that we could see taking advantage of having some kind of a meteorologist who has that technical competence and that's used to working with a lot of computers and maps and data, assimilating that and making sense of it. And again, back to the critical thinking and the strategic planner, knowing how to work through problems and understand multifaceted issues and try to project out into the future like forecast. That's what planners try to do. So there's a lot of those great roles. The one thing I think is kind of cool though is that in emergency management, a lot of times we start with the weather and many different fronts, whether it be our daily brief that we might get from someone or from the weather service, to how we plan, or when we're operating. Weather is setting the tone for quite a bit of what we do and what emergency managers react to and plan for. So this is just a little snippet from our comprehensive preparedness guide, one of those guides we put out to emergency managers on how to plan and be ready for disasters. That first or that second step, step 2, understanding the situation. This graphic doesn't really give credit to all those different steps in there, but that is a key part of planning, understanding the threats and hazards and assessing risk. If you can't do that right, everything else is going to be wrong. So, and that's where weather fits into emergency management, understanding that situation, understanding those threats the best they can for the communities or facilities that they might be dealing with. FEMA has a joke about being flexible, and I think you also have to be flexible and if you're seriously looking at emergency management, you have a degree in meteorology, leverage what you're good at and what you like to do to find your way in. You have to be flexible. You may have some great ideas or have some thoughts on what you want to do in emergency management. Key is be flexible at first. There might be some unique opportunities right in your backyard. As mentioned before, weather services can be few and far between locations wise, but your counties, many counties, especially in the southeast, and we're seeing them in the northeast, many counties and municipalities have emergency management offices. Great places to get your foot in the door, volunteer your services. They may even have jobs that are similar to what you're interested in that might be opportunities. If you like talking and training is a good one, and communicating. We have a lot of the skill sets that we practice, even writing, can be helpful for those. So be flexible on what you're going to do, and knowing that this could lead to gaining a greater social network, working with the National Weather Service possibly, and supporting them through emergency management. If National Weather Service or another higher federal service in emergency management might be what you're looking for, but starting at the local level or state level is a great way to do it, because you're gaining that experience. I know looking at resumes, seeing a local, someone who's worked at a local level or a county level and a state level, it's really good to see that breadth, because they understand what happens, because disasters happen at a local level. That's where it starts, in the response, in the planning. So, but having that experience is really key. So I would say try to be flexible as possible when you're trying to find your way in, getting that experience. It could be very informal on how you get your job. You could volunteer one day and the next day you have a full-time job in leading up people or working in an EOC where there's staff needed. It's just a matter of fact, as we in emergency management, we have a lot of turnover. Disasters and some of this work can be very stressful. Also, you get a lot of experience pretty quick, so you can move up the ladder pretty quick. The next, I want to talk a little bit about what do you do now. Again, finding that local office support if you can. If you're doing more studies or any research, thinking about some of the emergency management issues out there. Becoming a subject matter expert to support at a local level, and just getting to know the weather field and operations, understanding how the weather service works, what private entities are out there, and how they all work together to meet that need of the weather, and cross training, having a lot of different skills in your toolbox to meet the need, I think is key to have, as Katie mentioned. So when you do try to sell yourself, of course now my computer doesn't want to do something, please hold. There we go. When we start talking about applying and what should your resume look like or anything like that, focus on your experience and skills that you're doing or what you've gained, and make sure it makes sense. If it's a job that's focused on communications, you want to really talk about what you did communications wise. As Laura and Trish mentioned, make sure you might have to tailor these specifically and find what are those key things the hiring agency or that position is looking for, and try to sell yourself on those. Key on those experience that you know the game, you've been there, you've done it, and that's why I go back to being flexible and finding some kind of work or experience. And again, not too short, too long. Also, you want to be able to, when someone's looking at your resume or your experience, they should see some of those key words and not every single thing you ever did in the position, but what are those key things that are applicable, that give you that experience, that were integral, that you would want to highlight if you're being interviewed. Every single training class you've ever taken might be good, but what about the ones that are applicable to this emergency management field or this communications or this GIS? So yeah, a tailored resume that's readable, that highlights those key things right up front, that has the information that's needed. Much easier to find a candidate that does that, as opposed to just a blanket resume that might hint at that this person might be the right person. You want almost that resume to be that one to say, hey, if this position's being hired out there, this is the resume, what this resume should look like, and here's how I can tailor those things I've done through my life, my career, my studies, my training, to that, and really key on those. In the federal service, and I've seen in other announcements, when they have ideal candidate would have, make sure you highlight that. Make sure that those HR folks that see your resume see that you're an ideal candidate. If you have experience in working in emergency management, you better put it in there, but got to highlight it. You can't be buried in a bullet somewhere in a volunteer somewhere. And think about your other work you've done for any other agency, company work on it, and how it might apply to some of those general things like project management or communications or writing or working in a team. Don't discount some of that work. And that you know, they put out these pretty verbose statements, but what are they asking for here? And make sure you can sell yourself on some of those key things that you have. When it comes to emergency management, though, advanced degrees, there's a lot of them out there. If it gets you to those extra skills, whether it be like an emergency management degree or a GIS degree as you're working on in meteorology, I think that's good, especially if you have the drive for it, or if it's geared towards it. It can get you that experience, or even better if it's working with a agency doing some studies or work. Huge benefit if you can tie it down and you're working with other people. But experience in the workforce can really trump sometimes a bunch of letters at your name. You want to see, as you're looking at, as mentioned, as you're looking at maybe hundreds of resumes, if there's someone who's, you know, maybe fresh out of school, that hasn't been in the workplace or in the EOC or somewhere similar, you might have a red flag. Whereas if someone said, oh wow, look, this person's done, you know, mentioned they had done some work during some big storm here or this event there, they're helping or supporting or being part of that. I think that could be huge, and just a testament that they kind of know what they're getting into. And again, when we talk about, especially in emergency management, even in the, you know, as long as if your degree is in a similar field, it could be, sometimes announcements could be earth sciences, which is huge. It could be geology or biology or meteorology or one of those, geography. If it's in a similar field, don't think that will disqualify you, especially if you have some kind of experience or work in an EM field. And again, going back to the being flexible, if you get a job that's close, take advantage of it. It'll get you closer find ways to, spread your wings. I think when you get into emergency management, you'll find that it might not be the ideal job, but once they figure out you're a meteorologist, they're like, well, we could use you here, and oh, can you look at this? So I think that's where emergency managers sometimes say, oh, we can get a few different hats filled by hiring meteorologists. So as I wind down here, with my computer about to restart, some other thoughts on interviews, if you ever are talking with emergency managers in interviews, and it goes back to some of the stuff that Laura and Trish were saying, and Katie, be aware of the technical jargon and acronyms and models. It can really, it's crazy how many acronyms are duplicative and they mean totally different things. Don't come off too excited about bad weather or a disaster, or come off as a disaster junkie. It's a tough balance, a fine line to say you like disasters and like bad weather, and then you like to study them and you want to help support them. And be really clear on your intentions for getting into the EM field for yourself and for the hiring person. Are you there to save the world? Are you there to be a team player? Are you there to learn? Are you there to, move up in the world of emergency management or gain more skills in? Think about that, because believe it or not, people can sometimes see through some of that. When you're looking at resumes and interviewing a lot of people, how you phrase things and put these down, it can resonate. But be clear on your intentions. And it's okay. The question usually asked is, why do you want to be in this job? Make sure your intentions are clear. Make sure you know why you're getting into it too. And don't oversell your weather prowess. As Katie mentioned, the Weather Service is their first go-to gal in this, and they are the ones that they're looking to first. And you could just be that support, that person to bring some meteorological SME-ness, subject matter expertness, or the person that can do those one-off briefings, or the person that connects them to the right person, which is more often than not. And being flexible, showing that you want to be a team player always gets very, very, very far. Being able to work in teams is sometimes greater. Going back to the pie thing, proficiency is one thing, but the experience and everything else can be really a big deal. And then show commitment to the job at hand. You're there, and I know it might be tough because you might have a lot of feelers out there all at once, but hopefully you can convey that commitment to the job and to the people you might be talking to.